everyone an opportunity. But to break the ice, my first question for all is very simple, but in fact it is not. How would you, in person, in one sentence, define social entrepreneurship?
Yeah. Social entrepreneurs, for me, are pattern changers who find entrepreneurial solutions to social and environmental problems. It does not matter whether they're organized as for-profits or non-profits, because it depends on the problem that you want to solve.
Thank you.
Če smo po vrsti. Ja, verjetno v tistem smislu, da dobiček za vsako ceno ni edino merilo uspeha.
Cost is not really a criterion of success.
No, jaz bi rekel, to je tisto podjetništvo,
So this is entrepreneurship,
kjer kratkoročno ni samo dobiček pomemben.
which is not focused on profit only short term, but when it comes to long-term profits, I think this is important. But short term, you need to take a more comprehensive approach. Why? Because you are aware of the fact that this approach is really a condition for
I would agree with Max in some of the cases where it's primarily looking at taking a social problem and looking at it from a brand new innovative way to how to solve that. And whether it is for profit or not for profit, it's really trying to address that and be innovative in that process.
Hvala lepa. Zrem po občinstvu, zrem po rokah. Če ne, dr. Martin, prvo vprašanje za vas. Ne vem, koliko poznate socialno podjetništvo tu v Sloveniji.
Entrepreneurship in Slovenia, but if you have some comments, we would be happy to listen to them. But secondly, what should Slovenia do to set up such organizations as Ashoka or attract them to Slovenia?
Thank you very much. Well, I think just a few points maybe. I am a little bit familiar because I'm involved with Ashoka and other organizations, so I'm obviously following the discussions on these issues to the extent that I can. 5 points. One, if you look at the classical, what has now become the classical social entrepreneurship model, the Ashoka model, it will tell you that on average you can find one social entrepreneur per 10 million inhabitants per year. Now, I live in Switzerland, and I can tell you how frustrating I find it that I should find 0.8 social entrepreneurs every year, right? So, what does it mean? It means that is a good model because you need some leaders in that space. And there are more than, you can find more than one per 10 million if you do it right. But that's not enough. So, the Ashoka model, therefore, has been complemented in recent years by looking for so-called change makers at large. So that brings me to point 2. Make sure that you look for more change makers. They don't all have to be today high-performing social entrepreneurs. The most important thing is to get talent into this space, to empower young people to solve pattern change, to change patterns, to solve social and environmental problems from a new perspective. You know, let's provide the resources and endorsement for that. That's point 2. So change makers as well. Point 3. This is a knowledge-intensive business, because if we want to solve problems, we need to understand what the problems are. It's the point that was made several times. We need to have listening skills. Inevitably, this involves universities as well, and schools at different levels. So thinking about social entrepreneurship in Slovenia, let's make sure there is some, you know, sort of local capacity built, and partially it's there. I know there's some people are writing dissertations, for example, on social entrepreneurship in Slovenia and beyond, so that we understand what works, what doesn't, how the sector is structured. So knowledge is critical, and institutionalizing that knowledge. Point 4, I have to say, you know, again, having been involved in this for some time, the infrastructure piece is critical. So you will have the first phase of enthusiasm, which is good. I mean, it's a movement. It's a sea change. People are involved. They want to do things. But you also need to resource them. This requires tools. This requires also thinking about what Mr. Stremler mentioned, how do we build an infrastructure that creates accountability for success and empowers successful social entrepreneurs so that they get more resources, so that we can really get to better problem solving at a societal level. And point 5, the legal structures are important. Now, I'm less familiar with the legal structures here, but I can tell you, for example, in Germany, I was going ballistic some years ago. We had a foundation client who wanted to make impact investments, sort of, investing some financial assets for profit in social entrepreneurs working with solar energy. And then the tax man came and said, but, why don't you just give these people a grant? We can't accept it by German government bonds. And, eventually we hired the right lawyers and it was worked out. But this kind of thinking is outdated. You need to have a regulatory environment where it is understood that social entrepreneurship can be for-profit and non-profit. It's about the best way of solving social problems in scale. And now, if you sum 1 to 5, I'm not saying do everything at once. That's insane and not doable. All we know about innovations is you need to pilot, and then you can scale. So what I would encourage, and of course you know your country, I don't know it that well, is, let's seed fund the right kinds of pilots and then be honest about what works and what doesn't. You have a lot of knowledge to share here. You have a lot of good practice already in business, in civil society. If you can unlock that and bring that together with the inherent power in the model of social entrepreneurship, it can be very powerful and transformational.
Thank you very much. We promise we will not be frustrated being only 2 million here. So, Vprašanja?
Thank you. My name is Benjamin again. I have a question. I don't know exactly for who, but because I don't know if you were all present in the morning panels, but I noticed quite a difference conceptual difference between what we were talking about in the morning and what we were talking about now. So how would you, if you were present in the morning, how would you comment on the law that Slovenian government has legislated now, which puts quite some limitations on the field of social entrepreneurship, instead of relaxing those to encourage more socially aware ventures. Thank you.
Kdo je bil zjutraj? Jaz priznam, mene tudi ni bilo, žal. So you were also not present in the morning, I know, because we just met when you came.
I did get up at 4 a.m. to come here, but it took me a while, so I'm sorry.
Just let me add another sentence to make it more clear. As I understand the new law imposes on the so-called social entrepreneurs or social businesses that they cannot share their profits. So how is this very broad basis going to support this conceptual paradigm shift that we are talking about now? Thank you.
Well, again, with the caveat that I have not read in detail the legal requirements that you just outlined. Clearly, law is also, in a sense, defined. It defines what we can do, but it is also a reflection of the state of thinking and development of a sector. So it's an iterative process. It's dialectic at the end of the day. From what we know, and I've been involved in some work creating new legal vehicles. For example, we've sponsored the so-called low-profit limited liability company, the L3C in the United States. Some model similar to the community interest company. It is actually a good thing if you have, from a legal point of view, if you have more flexibility. Now, that needs to be balanced with the legitimate desire of a regulator to understand what is going on. I would say the good news is, because we're talking about a social movement here at the end of the day, people will find ways, no matter what the legal context is, to do interesting things. Now, the question is, do you have an enabling environment or do you have a constraining environment? I have to tell you, frankly, if you're not happy and if it's too constraining, if it doesn't, for example, allow, more flexible use of profits, probably someone needs to lobby. Maybe it's not you, maybe it's no one here in the room, but then you should not give up on getting a re-regulation of the re-regulation. That said, the work we've done on the community interest company, the L3C, indicates that, of course, what we don't want when we talk about social entrepreneurship is just sort of tax subsidized or tax exempt entrepreneurship. That's not the right thing. So a community interest company in the UK, for example, is exempt, but it has an asset lock. You can't just buy and sell it and then, you know, make a huge profit by stripping it of its assets. So the intricacies here that we need to look at, I think the best way to take this debate forward is probably to connect, to build a group of people here in the country, connect them to what is going on in other countries where governments are experimenting, and then hopefully influencing the debate based on empirical evidence as opposed to opinions.
Jaz bi morda sam dodal en komentar. Pogledaj, mi v vzhodni Evropi ne gledamo...
When it comes to the Eastern Europe, we don't have a very sensational or dramatic approach because we know that despite the efforts of our government, we have still been successful despite their efforts. So we will find a way, I promise. Without any doubt, we will probably be very pleased to hear from the deputy who initiated this act. Thank you very much. We presented the act in the morning, and I can tell you that there have been some limitations. So a maximum of 20%, this is the ceiling which can be distributed, so profits which can be distributed among stakeholders. I will respond immediately. After 1 year, when this act will be evaluated, or even sooner, we'll introduce amendments if necessary, and the act could be corrected if you wish. But I still need to point out that all other companies who might work in compliance with the social entrepreneurship model, and they can still do that. So this is not a problem. They can do it at present in Slovenia. So our intention was not to limit anything. But when proposing the act, there was a huge debate as to what the state might do or what the European community can do. Seed investment, seed capital, and certain limitations and expectations had to be taken into consideration. Incentives, grants, which would be then translated into profits. Well, this was a limitation which had to be stipulated in the act. Zdenka Kovač, then Dr. Martin would also like to respond. We are warming up, which is good. Yes. I was also involved in formulating the act, and let me explain a thing or two. When we talk about social entrepreneurship as a narrow concept, we have learned from best practice examples from Europe. The key motive of social entrepreneurs is not to generate huge profits, but it is to address social and environmental problems. Of course, we have to generate profits because we are talking about business operations. Then, a very important characteristic for cooperatives and other forms active in social entrepreneurship, for example, associations and societies, so they do not distribute profits among stakeholders, but they reinvest these profits in further development of the company or organization in question. However, our act, based on the Companies Act, also makes for this provision that 20% of profits can be distributed among stakeholders, i.e. employees or other stakeholders, not just owners. Social entrepreneurship, however, has to be distinguished from the concepts put forward by other discussants. So we talk about socially responsible companies or socially sensitive companies. Here, these companies still pursue a primary or legitimate role. They focus on generating huge profits. However, their business model, as it has been explained by Mr. Škrabec, they also consider another business model. They have a social characteristic or social note. Of course, such companies have to distribute profits as this profit is generated. Yet it is desirable that profit...
I don't want to talk about here. I think from what my interaction has been with governments and government agencies on social entrepreneurship, the most important thing is not to get it right the first time, because that's not possible. We're talking about, we want to stimulate social innovation in scale, and we need to get the balance between incentives and, in a sense, limitations right. It's very difficult, because this is a moving animal in a sense. So the most important thing here is the mindset. And I have to say, I like from what I heard here that you're saying, well, we need to start somewhere. We've tried to balance the different elements, but we have an iterative approach. We will look at this, evaluate what works, what doesn't. Because while social entrepreneurship is a global phenomenon, of course, it takes place in a local context. And the local context means that there are certain ways of doing things in civil society, certain ways of doing things in government, and in the private sector. And all of this needs to be figured out. So I think as long as you have multi-stakeholder partnerships also in terms of evaluating how we're doing collectively in promoting this here, then I think you're on the right track. It's like an asymptotic function. It will never cut the axis, unfortunately, but our goal is to become infinitely close.
Preden dam tamle še eno vprašanje, magistra Kovačeva je dala eno zanimivo pobudo za vprašanje obema slovenskima gostoma. Oba sta izjemno uspešna.
The gauntlet has been thrown to our Slovenian speakers. They're hugely successful. They see social entrepreneurship as a whole. They are well aware of the concept of giving back something to the society. But what would you be willing to do in social entrepreneurship here in Slovenia? Maybe you didn't understand me well. It is not a question of profits at expense of other aspects, because profit is the precondition for a company to operate. But there is another question: how to generate profits, what path should be pursued. So whether we will have shortcuts, or whether you will comply with certain criteria as to how to generate profits. Lack of regulation, lack of ethical standards. We see that there are many people also in Slovenia who opt for this shortcut. As I have stated, personally and as our company, we want to give back to the society as much as possible. We focus our attention on those who innovate. We developed our projects with innovators who were at the brink of bankruptcy 7 or 8 years ago. I am very enthusiastic, and I believe that this project can be a success story. Cosmodisk, or 80% of Cosmodisk, was manufactured in sheltered workshops. So, not just to lower costs, but to have another component as well. As I have stated, I organize lectures to entrepreneurs. I never rejected an invitation. I am a mentor to 5 to 10 entrepreneurs every year for startup companies. There are many companies cooperating with Studio Moderna. We penetrate foreign markets, we recruit designers, and we lay emphasis on the cooperation with Slovenian companies, so local companies. This goes for innovation, software solutions, design, to name but a few. We are very open. We integrate everybody. Time is our biggest problem and our greatest limitation. But we always try to seek a way on how to exchange practices and to give back to the society. And this has also led to our image being created. So innovators see us as the avenue of choice. They trust us, they explain their innovations, This enables us to come up with solutions sooner when compared to others. This is then translated into cooperation. We are not backstabbers, but we try to find and strike a balance, so to have a win-win situation. So we are not talking about social entrepreneurship, but we provide quality. We give a hand to companies so that we help them when they penetrate new markets. Entrepreneurship is the biggest value for me. I'm very fond of the fact that I can promote entrepreneurship at my company level, so that every stakeholder, every employee is turning into an entrepreneur in his or her field of activity. We are involved in engineering. I didn't talk about that in my presentation. The Russian Federation, Belarus, the Ukraine, these are our primary markets. We offer and provide for comprehensive solutions. We construct hydropower plant in Macedonia, then transformation stations, hotels. We use Slovenian expertise, and we employ and recruit Slovenian companies. We create jobs when doing so. By way of conclusion, I will put one question to you. Food for thought. And I would also like to know, how do you see this? What is more socially responsible for an entrepreneur as I am? To create 100 new jobs in Slovenia or 1,000 new jobs in India? What is your view on that? You can respond immediately. I would be very interested to hear.
No, ok, lahko vzamete kot retorično, lahko pa to, da bi jaz tudi rad vedel res, kaj je bolj odgovorno.
Čeprav to ne gre v sfero egoizma, ampak seveda, absolutno je okoljsko in družbeno odgovornejše, da je 100 odprtih delovnih mest tle.
Kot 1000 novih v Indiji.
Iz našega perspektive gledano ja, ker smo pa vsi povezani, pa dilema, ja, mislim. Če smo vsi del sveta...
Because we live in an interconnected world, this is a dilemma. I would say 100 in Slovenia, 1,000 in India. I don't know if 100 outweighs 1,000 jobs in India. Maybe you should create 100,000 jobs in India. But you know what I mean. I just wanted to provide to you an example. I believe this is a very good question, because this does provide food for thought. It's not really a rhetorical question, but it does push us to go beyond our mental dispositions. Anyway, there is a dilemma, and I would like to conclude it by a thought of Yunus, who described his dreams in 1950. He said that there won't be any poverty, famine, homelessness, nor street children. Every country will have a museum of poverty. A global museum of poverty will be in that country which was the last to abolish poverty. What are your dreams, ladies and gentlemen? Social entrepreneurship could be a tool to realize these dreams. It could also be a weapon against those who do not share our dreams with us. It's so simple as it is. It's all about taking right decisions, about cooperation, and about taking on responsibility. Everyone could do this. In 5 minutes, we will all come here to this room to wrap up our discussions today. I would like to thank all of the guests for coming here, for sharing their wisdom with us. And I believe that this topic is quite new in Slovenia, and I'm sure we will confront it in the future.